So we're joined today by Matt Thorpe. We've been trying to get this chat going for a while. For those of you who don't know Matt, he's the owner of 12 Gauge, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, kickboxing black belt. Been training for how many years?
22 years, I think. 22 years. A while.
Yeah. What initially got you into training martial arts, or what gave you that initial inspiration to get started?
I was, lucky sort of generation of, there was quite a lot of movies at the time around that were martial arts based, Karate Kid, Van Damme era. Yeah. So growing up around that influenced me to a degree. I did Taekwondo for a couple of years when I was younger, but then sort of fell out of love with it. And I did kickboxing for a lot longer. But then sort of moved away from it for a bit, and then I met my ex-wife, and she was training at a karate club at the time, under a guy called Phil Wright. I think you trained with Phil, didn't you? And she used to come home and tell me stories about the training. I was like, that doesn't sound like karate, because obviously I've got an experience in that doesn't sound like karate, because they were doing an arm bar today or something. I was like, what the hell's that? And then, so she nagged at me a lot, and eventually said, okay, I'll come down. And it sort of started from there. They were, at the time, really into, I think he'd got the first couple of UFCs on video. I was watching a lot of that and playing around with the ideas. And they were importing a magazine called, I don't think it exists anymore, called Full Contact Fire. It was like a newspaper that was printed in America. And he was bringing that over, and it had, like printouts of techniques and stuff in it. So we're all sort of following them. And it sort of grew from there, really. Yeah. They were playing around with MMA, and I stuck around from that point on. Yeah. It sort of grabbed me, made sense to me. It was like, this makes sense. This is realistic. Yeah.
The first time I met you, I was just some snot-nosed 15-year-old kid training with Phil Wright. I'd moved over from doing karate myself to training with Bucko when we were in school. That's where he was training. And you come down maybe on one or two occasions to give a class or like kind of participate in the class and show some stuff. And what point in your career would you have been at that point? Because I guess that must have been about 15 years ago. By then you were already in MMA.
I was about 50, work backwards. Yeah. I was about, 40, it would have been 25, 24, 25. So yeah, I was sort of in the middle of my pro MMA fighting then. Career. So I must have been training at the Coliseum up in Lee at that point, part of the Northern Cartel, which was a group of gyms in the north that all used to train together, mainly based in Diggle, in a gym called Quantum, with the Butlin brothers, which was a cool. I mean, it was ahead of its time, really. It was a cool setup, full on cage, ring, everything. So I'd have been sort of slap bang in the middle of my fight career at that point, when I used to pop down to Phil's every now and again, because I'm sure he had training on Friday, and none of the gyms I was training at had training on Friday. Yeah. So I used to pop down every Friday.
A lot of like 16, 17-year-old kids in the class, and a couple of blokes as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, you had Mike and that.
Mike was there.
Yeah. So I used to pop down to get some extra training in, which was cool.
Yeah.
And everyone was keen to train, so it was. Called Avi there, I think, as well, and there's a few.
Yeah.
What was the training like then? Like, was everything under one roof? Sort of when you were in the midst of your pro, or still sort of scattered?
When I first started, obviously I was under Phil for a couple of years. He set his own facility up, and I trained exclusively with him. But then I branched off and obviously wanted to start competing, and his gym shut down for a period of time. And he moved somewhere else, so I hunted out a lot of the gyms that were fight training at the time. So I used to sort of bounce between gyms a lot of the time. So I was at Coliseum up in Lee. I went into town, did a little bit of Carl Townsville's place at the time. It wasn't called SBJ back then. I think it was called Defence Unlimited, because Carl and Phil used to know each other, so I did a little bit there. Plus Colin Robinson was doing the jiu-jitsu in the gi back then. Obviously, he had a blue belt, so there wasn't many blue belts in the area. So I used to bounce there. I used to go in Bromley's a bit. Before it was even catch wrestling, when he just had a wrestling class up in Cheadle. So I used to go there and train there as well. I just bounced around a lot of places. Went Thai boxing at Pele's in Altrincham for a while. I bounced around a lot of gyms doing that for a long time. Boxing gym up in Altrincham, I can't remember what it was called, to be honest with you. Bounced around a lot of gyms, and then sort of settled at the Coliseum and the Northern Cartel. We all sort of started to get a group of fighters that all trained together a lot. And we all sort of settled on that as our home base. And sort of built from there. We had quite a successful fight team at one point. So we all just trained under one roof at that point then. We didn't need to bounce as much because we had quite a lot of knowledge between us all. We had boxers and all within that one facility, so it became a bit easier then.
And like for the guys listening as well, what would you say were a few notable highlights from your competitive career? Or fights you enjoyed?
Fights I enjoyed? I can't remember my fight career nowadays. It feels that long ago. It's weird. I'm most well known for my fight with Dan Hardy. It's probably what pushed me to fight at a higher level. Because obviously Dan was having quite a lot of success at the time and in Cage Warriors. That obviously went on to fight George St. Pierre for the UFC title. So I'm probably most well known for that. It got me quite a lot of different articles and stuff out there on being a good fight. It was a good fight. It was an enjoyable fight to be part of. It was 5 rounds. It was the first time I'd ever gone out the first round, I think. So it was an experience fighting 5 rounds for the title, and again it pushed me to that. And I got quite a lot of international fights after that, which was cool. The whole career is kind of a big highlight. Because for me it wasn't about chasing that sort of. I wasn't that fussed about getting to the UFC, or it was just about experiences, life experiences for me, and enjoying it. And the fact I got to fight all over the world was cool. Considering I started in a scout hut in Romley, to then get to fight in Russia, St. Petersburg, or over in America, Sweden, it was cool. That was enough for me.
Which point did you know coming towards the end of your career, or did you know beforehand that coaching was something that you wanted to get into?
It just felt like a natural progression. I knew in my heart I'd lost the fire underneath me. You guys have competed. It takes a lot to push yourself to that extreme level all the time. Especially MMA. As it's progressed, it's got tougher and tougher, and you've got to train more and more extreme. And obviously, I was working a full-time job at the time as well, so I kind of knew I was coming to a time where I wanted to retire from it and move away from fighting, and it just seemed like a natural progression to, you've spent so many years picking up this knowledge. Seems a waste just to go, I'm just going to knock it on the head now and just do a little bit of training and call it a day. So it just felt like the natural progression to move over to coaching.
So how was that sort of transition then? Because you sort of see it with a lot of their sort of competitors, coaches now, they sort of struggle with that transition from competing to no longer competing and just sort of coaching.
Yeah.
How did you find that sort of transition?
In the sense of what? Did I miss competing?
Yeah.
No. I enjoy coaching way more than what I did competing, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I had a successful career at fighting, but it wasn't. I probably. I would never probably have got to the top level because it probably just wasn't ever in me to be, absolutely world class. I never had. It's not that I didn't have, I trained hard, I trained everything, but it was never in me to, I never. Maybe I didn't believe in my skills enough or something, but I never, my mental game wasn't. That's the difference usually in the percentages is in the mental game. My mental, I'm honest with myself, and I knew that I'd probably got to the ceiling of where I was going to get. Whereas with coaching, it's something that I absolutely, once I got into it, it really pulled me in, and it's something that now is probably way more rewarding than my fight career ever was.
So 12 Gauge has been going for at least 10 years now, hasn't it?
Yes, last year was our 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, and the size of the place that you're in now is enormous. But there's been a couple of iterations of it along the way, hasn't it? So how did that all start off? What were the...
Well, I was still fighting when we first started 12 gauge out, and we started renting off friends of ours down up in Reddish, Factory BJJ, with Adam. So I started renting off them. I think they had classes 2 or 3 times a week, so we took the other 2 nights off them and did MMA there. And the gym was tiny back then. You know, it was probably fit about 8 people in it. It was a really small little gym. I don't know if you remember Factory when it was like. Did you guys
Never
go to
tried
the
that.
first?
Yeah, the new place.
Right. And then they moved to a slightly bigger unit, and we took space. And then obviously we were both growing at the same sort of pace then, and we hit a point where it's like, you know, we've both probably got too many members each year, so I moved to my own unit at that point, and then it grew from there. You know, we started in probably about 2,000 square foot facility. It got busy. I was like, right, let's take a gamble, and we moved to a 4,000 square foot. Got busy. I mean, to be fair, I might not have moved out my old place, but they sold it on and turned it into flats. So when we took this place on, I did only ask for 6,000 square foot, but they gave me 8,000 square foot. So
And
thought, why not?
That place is still being in the process of being turned into flats now, like 2 years
3 years later, and it's still being turned into flats. Yeah, they're not even any. I don't think they've emptied the place yet.
No. I
It's
think
crazy.
R&P's still on the bottom floor in there.
No, they're gone now.
They're
They're up in Reddish as well. They've
Right,
got a
okay.
unit up in Reddish. Yeah, they're not. There's no businesses left. They are starting to do a bit more with the building, but I'm guessing it'll be another couple of years until it's completely turned into flats.
Over those first couple of years up until now, what would you say was like the biggest hurdles or lessons you've learned from the beginning that have carried forward over the years to developing the business? Because it started from scratch, and as we all know, it's like a big learning curve, isn't it? To start
As a martial artist, when you start running your own club, and you guys run your own club as well, is you want to just teach martial arts. Yeah. So it's like, I just want to do this bit. But then there's this whole other entity over here which is running a business, which is totally different to this bit. Yeah. And you want to spend your time doing this bit, but unfortunately this bit might not have any members at the moment, and it's this bit that's important that gets you the members. So you have to go and learn marketing, building websites, getting yourself out there, going to schools to do, you know, if you want to build a kids program up, getting leaflets out there, doing all this other stuff that you've got no training in this. Well, it depends on where you come from, but you know, it's something I didn't have any training in. You know, I've got all these martial arts skills, but I've got no training in that, so I had to, you know, I spent a lot of years trial and error learning this business side of things, and that was the biggest probably takeaway. You know, if I had to start again now, it'd be a whole, you know, I know where to start doing that, but back then I had absolutely no clue.
That big business bit of the pie is a massive slice versus the actual teaching of the classes.
Yeah,
isn't
the
it?
teaching the classes is, you know, for martial arts, you've done it many years, is quite easy because you know what you're doing. It's like, well, I've got that bit nailed. Why is no one coming? Well, it's because they don't know you're there.
Yeah.
You know, you start saying it, build it and they will come, is a load of nonsense. It doesn't happen. Yeah, so you've got to know how to get yourself out there. And then it is easier nowadays because you've got social media. So there's much easier ways into it. You know, I can't, you know, because it was so long ago, I can't. Social media did exist when, it's weird that, but when I first started the club, I can't remember if it was still sort of MySpace was the big thing back then, more than Facebook.
Might have been, yeah.
It might have been back then. So as social media's grown, it's become a little easier to get your name out there and get your, you know, and hit your local area. Because before that was more leaflet dropping and, you know, and getting your website. But yeah, that's something that's, you've got to get that bit right to make the coaching bit
And
work.
actually, like over the years as well, as much as you'd like to think the shift of the pie had changed to being able to do more what you enjoy doing with any business, you always spend equally as much time doing the business and backshop stuff as you do
You
delivering.
probably spend more time.
Yeah.
You spend more time doing the business bit than you do the bit that you're coaching. Yeah.
I think a lot of people sort of underestimate like the use of systems in the business side of it, don't they? Whereas like talk about systems in coaching, in martial arts, and how you actually perform it, but then applying that sort of similar kind of mindset to the business side of things will simplify things. We do struggle with.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, you know, you go, I've got this system to get an arm bar, and then it goes off this way, or this system, you know, if I use a jab, it breaks down. And you get it, oh yeah, it's perfect. And then you go, well, why don't you use a system in business? And you're like, well, I don't know what you mean. It's like, we've just spent years learning these different systems for that. It's the same idea, you know. It's so without a doubt, systems. Some of the, you know, obviously over the years I've read some books and stuff, but you know, I think it's called E-Myth Revisited. I don't know if you've read that book and stuff, but that talks a lot about systems and the way franchise businesses work, and how McDonald's is always the one that everyone harps on about, but the way that they have a system for absolutely everything they do, absolutely everything. You know, it's a book, and you just follow it, boom, 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 point by point, and then it makes everything easier. Yeah, and without a doubt, that's the way you've got to start. You know, if you want to run the bit, especially because sometimes you find that a bit boring. You got to just write down a system. It takes a bit of time. Once you've got it, you can just follow that and do the bit you enjoy. Yeah.
It's like the short-term pain for long-term like gain, really, isn't it? Sort of like
exactly.
you go through that every day in training.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, but then you kind of enjoy training.
Yeah, exactly.
There's loads of good resources out there for it as well. I know one that I've used a lot over the most recent years is like podcasts. There's a lot of info out there on podcasts. Like I listen to the Jocko podcast a lot. I don't know if that's one that you've listened to, but
I'll be honest. I'm not. I tend to read books more than I do watch the podcast.
The good thing about this podcast is that they'll do like deep dives into books, and a lot of them are like military, like field manual sort of stuff, which is what you're talking about in terms of processes.
I mean, the Army's like absolutely nailed on systems. And that's how they pretty much, you know, the whole thing is systemised absolutely to the T.
So, any books other than the one you just mentioned before that you could pinpoint as a good resource for people to go and look at?
For business, I'd have to have a look. The problem is my memory is absolutely national at times off the top of my head. He missed the one that stuck out. I remember reading that book and going, this is how you run a business. This is how you run a business. I get it now. Yeah, you know, sometimes you read it and go, well, I have not thought about that myself. That makes total. But again, you have it in martial arts where someone will show you something and go, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
it's like you know the thing, but connecting the dots.
Sometimes someone points out the dots to you. All right, yeah, I get it. And I remember the E-Myth was one of the books that I read, and I was like, right, I get it. I get. Understand that putting these systems in place makes a difference. And then if you get someone else to do that system for you, the bit that you maybe don't enjoy doing, you can go, well, here's the manual on how to do it. And then you can step away from that and do your own thing.
That's quite a good point, isn't it? Like a collaborative effort on stuff sometimes it's great to have somebody else to bounce your ideas off, even if they're not leading the charge.
Yeah.
And it gives you a different frame of reference, or just allows you to kind of detach from being stuck in the thick of it. You're trying to run the business at the same time as all these other things are going on, and it's hard to just step back and see something easy that you could just see from like going third person mode on it.
Yeah, the wood for the trees. Now sometimes you've got to be able to step away, or have someone that can step away and say, you've got to ask other people's ideas. You know, it's better. You know, I mean, I do that quite a bit. I'll say to someone, you know, from the outside, what does this look like? So they can give me feedback that is, you know, that I'm not necessarily. I might be looking down the wrong path. And sometimes as well is and again as a business you realise that, and coaching is, you know, a lot of the time, especially for guys that have gone high level, you think, I want to coach high level athletes and guys, and that's only a small part of the whole picture. And understanding what your clients want from you makes a big difference. You know, you're going, if you're going to fight in this, and you know, 90% in the room are like, well, I'm never going to fight. I don't want to do that. I'm here just to learn a bit of martial arts and have fun. Yeah. So you've got to understand how you talk to people and talk to one person in one way and a different person maybe differently.
It's like John Danaher posted, I think it's this week, about like 95% of the room might never compete. But it's that 95% that makes the well, especially in this sport, that makes that 5% what they are when they go out and compete.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to be able to tailor towards the general public who have got zero aspirations to compete, or maybe even just get to the black belt, but they just want to come in, forget about the day and train, and they're going to help that 5-10% who are going to essentially go out and compete and represent and push the gym even more.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. I mean, you know, you'll see it in all sports, but they'll have this sort of like the pyramid shape, and you know, your bottom core is going to be your grassroots.
Yeah.
You know, your grassroots, and your grassroots, any sport, huge, you know, even football, whatever. Your grassroots are what support the next levels up the tree. Yeah, up that pyramid. You know, your top's your elite. You know, it's tiny little portion here, but without that huge grassroots section, you know, that tiny little elite doesn't exist.
No.
Yeah, and sometimes you've got to get that across to athletes. Sometimes, because athletes are very, like, you know, can be very sort of self-focused on what they're doing. You've got to sometimes explain that to them, like, look, these guys are what support you guys being able to do it at this top. Yeah, these guys are the fans that watch you guys at the top do it. Yeah, you know, so you've got to, you know, it's a bigger picture than just, you know, the elite sometimes.
That's a perfect segue for what we were talking about before we started recording, isn't it? Because you said the mindset difference and ego between athlete and coach, and how totally that needs to change. Maybe you could just elaborate on that again.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, like, you know, the mindset of an athlete is without a doubt. I don't like using the word selfish, but you know, and I'd compete as an athlete myself, and you're very selfish on your, you know, you're centered on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to focus on. Yeah, what goes on around you, you're not usually that bothered about, because you're aiming for this goal, and especially in the fight game, it's you know, it's someone's going to get in a cage with you and punch you in your face. So it's, you know, it's quite extreme to a degree. So you're very centered on, you know, I've got to be successful in that competition I'm going to have. Whereas as a coach, it's very different. You're concentrating on helping other people. Yeah, you want to help all your athletes. As a coach, it shouldn't be ego driven. It isn't about people bowing down to you as a coach. You know. But I'm not of the mindset of bowing to my sensei. It's not. It's like we're all equals. I'm here to help you. It should be athlete driven. I'm here to help you, as an athlete, get better. How can I do that? Yeah, it's not about you must do this. I'm not going to dictate to you. I'm going to help you be better and help you, because you're different to you. Yeah, to the next person. You'll need different needs to what you'll need, and that's what coaching's about for me. Yeah, it's not about being bowed down to, or, you know, any sort of ego in it whatsoever.
100%. That's one thing I've learned the biggest over the years with PTing and coaching. It's like knowing the individuals and knowing how to get the best out of them, and actually get them to understand what they want and where they want to go with it as well. And that's probably the biggest skill, isn't it? Because you come into an industry with a skill set, and you know what's been successful for you, and you might not have seen what your coach has done to, like, milk that out of you almost. And then you're like, oh, this is what I do, and this is how you become successful. But then you try and apply it to somebody else who's got a completely different personality or motivation, and then it's like, fuck, it's not working. And then that's where you really start to develop as a coach, isn't it?
Everyone's motivated by different things, you know, and then and even from a physical standpoint, everyone's different builds, different strengths, different fitness levels. You know, and if you're going, I mean, I think when you first start coaching, you go down the path of teaching what's worked for you, because that's what makes sense to you. But then you know, as a good coach, you'll expand out and quickly realise, hang about, that's only going to work for a percentage of people. I need to understand what works for them and what works for this and this body type and this fitness level and this. So then it expands away from that. And as a coach, that's what you're starting to take on board and understand is. You have to have, I think as a coach, you have a lot more knowledge than you do necessarily as an athlete. Because an athlete, you just develop yourself. But as a coach, you've got to develop a lot of different people. So your knowledge base has to expand even more.
We've had that conversation before, and so we're about, like, actually as an athlete, you might have the knowledge, but breaking it down and being able to pass it on to somebody else, because you know how to do an armbar, great. Can you teach how to do it? What are the important bits?
Without a doubt, you know, because especially in the early days, maybe when I was training, a lot of stuff was learned within sparring, so maybe not picked up, not necessarily been taught it, we'd just learned through trial and error. So, and I think to a degree, because obviously rolling, especially in jiu-jitsu, is a very heavy part of the game. People roll a lot, so you learn a lot in your spar, but you don't necessarily pay attention to the fact you've learned that. So, you know, if you were to say to someone, you know, why did you do that? They wouldn't even be able to tell you. I don't know. Because it works. It's usually because it works is the answer. But there'll be a reason they've done it and developed it. But you've got to go back and break down your game sometimes and go, that's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm doing it. I think when you start coaching, that's when that starts to come out. You're thinking probably like, I've got to. If I need to pass this information on to someone, I have to know the why. Yeah, it's not good enough for me to just say do this.
So was there like any sort of your time coaching then, like any big revelations where you sort of like might not necessarily been massive change in the way you approached it, but sort of in your mindset you're sort of like, right now this is sort of that this sort of keys unlock that door type of thing?
Big question. The biggest one is more the one we've just discussed, really. Yeah. You know, the one where you really, and well, couple of understanding that everyone's different. Yeah, that first revelation, I think, as a coach, is the biggest one, where everyone's different. Not what you do is not necessarily the right way of doing things. It's individual, and understanding that makes a huge difference in the way you approach coaching. I think as a coach, you're always learning, so you're always coming up with different ideas, and and it depends on what level you're coaching, who you're coaching. You know, like if I'm coaching someone that's doing it for a hobby, I'm going to approach them totally different to someone that's doing it that wants to go pro. Obviously, I'm probably talking MMA specific more. Because obviously, I deal more with MMA guys. It's a whole different approach. And I think understanding that is the bigger revelations as a coach when you first come into it. Because I think most people do go in and teach their game at first, but then you quickly realise you've got to expand away from that.
I think a big one for me over the years as well, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but people who come in to train, whether they're hobbyists or athletes or anything like that, they bring certain attributes into the gym naturally. They might not be able to do the thing that they come into you to coach for, but they've got good creativity because they're an artist or they play music or something like that, or whatever it is job they've got. And one of the biggest things that I've found is actually trying to transpose that level of skill or brain onto the thing that you're trying to get them to do to open up the creativity.
Yeah, I think as a coach sometimes it helps. So sometimes knowing what they do and what they're into helps, because if you go away and maybe learn what it is they're doing, maybe they're an artist or whatever, if you can then talk to them in stuff that they understand when you're explaining in a jiu-jitsu idea, concept, or a striking concept, they get it a bit quicker because they go, oh, right, yeah. They put the dots together quicker. Yeah, the way you talk to someone, if you can talk in their language, the sooner you learn that and can express that to them without a doubt, it makes a huge difference in the way they will grow. Rather than just talk them to in a language you understand. Yeah, if you can give them analogies that that make sense in their world, they're going to pick stuff up a lot quicker. But again, that comes down to the coach going away and maybe learning what they're talking about.
There's a lot of behind the scenes aspects to coaching, isn't there? Yeah. I know, like we kind of touched on it before about, you got your grassroots and arguably maybe even before that with the kids, if you've got a kids program, getting the kids into it, but like all the aspects up the ladder on somebody's journey, let's say they're coming in from being a kid, that then, like I'm thinking Brooklyn's probably a good example, starts training as a kid, starts getting the shows and travelling for the shows as a coach. There's a hell of a lot going on behind the scenes there, isn't there, on that pathway from beginner to elite?
Oh, it's huge, huge, and obviously, especially if you're dealing with kids, because you're dealing with them at different stages within their growth cycle. So you're dealing with someone that's I mean, we have tinies that are 2 to 4 that are parents classes where they're just running around. What you deliver to them is and the needs they have are totally different to an elite adult. And if you're going to take someone from that age all the way through, it's going to change every cycle. And that's something that you've got to plan for, and your programs have to be designed. So, at this age, this is their learning process. This is what, they're interested in. And then managing that all the way up through the different processes, until they get to that, elite level athlete when they're older. Brooklyn's a great example. He started young. He started at, I can't remember what it was. maybe 9. And at 9, his needs will have been different to what they are now. Because now he's 16 and he's at fight camp level and all that. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, I know. Like taking people on the journey through stuff, that's got to be a really rewarding feeling, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Starting that process, and then 1, seeing him develop in skill, but 2, seeing him develop as a person.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and the martial arts, for me, it teaches you everything. Like in life, you need to learn determination, focus. Everything. Yeah, you can take analogy from everything that you do in martial arts. So it's very, very rewarding. I think anyone that sticks around and follows the whole process. And again, we've used Brooklyn as a great example. One of the athletes that trains here is a good example of that. He's a well-mannered young man, and he's got a lot from training martial arts, and he's got a bright future ahead of him now because of that. And it's very rewarding to see that. When you've seen him from being very young, starting out. It's good to see they've stuck out the process as well. But sometimes the process people can rush the process, and you've got to believe in it. You've got to believe in that, and especially with kids, because they have different, at a certain age, especially like 4 to 6 year old, we have a very successful 4 to 6 year old program, and at that age, it isn't necessarily teaching them loads of martial arts. You're just teaching them balance. Yeah, they're getting stronger. You're building up and just learning to listen and things like that. And they want to have fun. They want to play games. They're learning through games more than they are standing in the line going hiya, hiya. Yeah, it's not what we. It's not. And sometimes the parents can want that side of it, but that side comes if you follow the right process. Yeah,
I think it's very rare for anybody to get into something with the aspiration to be, I want to become a professional, and then actually stick with it, because that fun aspect is massive, isn't it? You've got to enjoy it, or it's just going to be a fucking chore to go and do that.
Yeah, it can't be. I know they talk about the grind and that, but it can't be a grind every day, otherwise you're not going to stick at it.
Especially not as a kid.
No, as a kid you're going to have enough of this.
Maybe in China that works.
Yeah. When they hothouse kids away, you all get locked away in flipping the mountains, and you're going to train MMA for the next 10 years, and nothing you can do about it. Over there, but no, over here it's totally. They've got to enjoy it, and you can't force them down the path. You've got to let them make their own decisions. And I mean, there's a great thing, the YPD model, the Youth Physical Development model, I think it's called. It sort of shows you the development of where they should be at certain age groups, and what you should be focusing on in coaching with them. And that's something as a coach, I think, when you're developing kids programs. Have you seen that?
I've not seen that.
I'll send you I'll send you a link to it and stuff. It's cool if you're thinking of developing kids programs. It's very important, process of understanding how to develop the different programs and what you should be focusing on. And sometimes it's about educating the parents about that. Because obviously sometimes they come in and they want little Johnny to be able to do a spinning hook kick at 5, and you're like, look, let's get him hopping on one leg first. And we'll build from there. And because especially if you force a kid down a sport, you tend to find that once they get to a teenage, they want to quit.
Yeah.
Whereas if they've just enjoyed the process and enjoyed being part of it, when they get to the teenage years, all of a sudden they have focus and want to take it more seriously. Whereas if you force them at a young age, by the time they get older, they want to quit it. I've seen so many talented kids come through that have been forced at a young age and lose focus when they get older.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a bit softer approach early on, and they want to, they want to be here, eventually when they get too older, they then really want to nail down the focus.
It's like developing that sort of social circle around here and having that happiness attachment to the gym.
It's important.
And then they're gonna, even if they don't continue the sport, they're gonna continue living a more active life down the line.
Yeah, and your job as a coach is and I'll say this, even for our 4 to 6 year program, I'll say it to the parents, say, look, even if they move on and do a different sport, as long as I've set them up to do some sort of sport in their life, I'm happy as a coach, because there's a lot of physical and healthy aspects about doing sport, especially in the times we are now. It's proven that, being healthy is important.
Yeah.
For well-being and also from the physical side of things. Yeah, so if we can set them up to go on and play rugby, go on and play football, go on and do whatever, doesn't matter, tennis, whatever, they go on and play something else, and that's fantastic. We've done our job as a coach and inspired them to go on and do something else. That's fine. It's cool if they stick with martial arts, but
general rule of thumb for kids, they say try and expose them to like 4 or 5 sports at an early age, and then it filters down as you get to like starting high school, finishing high school, college, and then by the time you're in college or the end of high school, you're probably doing the one that you enjoy, and that's where you channel in your effort, isn't it?
Your effort.
I think from my experience of teaching with kids, and it's from swimming teaching actually years ago. I don't know whether you could say the same, like a tip for parents bringing kids to lessons is like, unless you can see anything glaringly obvious that's going wrong that needs speaking up about, kind of let the coach do the job and not interfere.
Yeah, I suppose you see that in football a lot, don't you? Parents screaming from the sidelines, and you don't see it as much in martial arts. They tend to let the coaches get on with it, but no, it's something that unless there's something glaringly, like you say, out of place, let the coach do the job usually, because they know how to approach. If you're dealing with a good coach, but again, that comes down to do your research.
I think I was in Mjolnir in Iceland, and they've got a great way for it, where they've got like the training room, but they've got a massive glass wall.
So it's a viewing gallery, but you can.
Exactly. Yeah. So then the parents can't be scolding the kid when it's sort of like, no, maybe they're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Let the coach handle that.
Yeah, and actually, sometimes them just even being there in the room's a distraction for the kid, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm supposed to be paying attention to the teacher, but I can see my mum over there giving me the that kind of we'll go back a little bit to what we just talked about before, because that next step along the line, if they start to get serious, you've travelled a lot with like some of the youth athletes that are starting to turn amateur and pro now for international competitions. And obviously your involvement with the regulatory bodies for that. Maybe you just want to talk about that for a little bit. Like the
we've got EMA now, which is set up, which is the English Mixed Martial Arts Association, which is looking to be the sort of governing body of MMA within England. They've obviously linked in with the IMAF project, which has got the sort of world championships now, which they hold all over the world. And they have the European they have lots of different championships. I'm lucky enough that I've sort of coached some of the squads now. We've been over to Bahrain a couple of times, Vegas a couple of times with it. Last year they did the first cadets world championships, which was cool to be part of. I think they had about 300 or 400 kids over there competing from sort of, I can't remember the age groups off the top of my head now, but I'd say maybe 10 and up. Obviously, very modified rules.
Yeah.
It's very heavy grappling, really. But it was cool to be part of and see the progression of the sport. And obviously over here now, it's something we're pushing quite big. We've got Dean Garnett is a huge part of pushing the post-16 courses that are coming through EMA, which will. So anyone that's finishing school can go to, so maybe they don't want to take the normal path of, they want to go down more combat sport specific route. And they've got these post-16 courses for them guys, which will have specific MMA qualifications. But the beauty of this is these qualifications are all being designed so they will be a recognised governing qualification. It's not, me signing a certificate saying you are recognised. It's recognised by the government. You can put it on your CV. Yeah. You can use these qualifications to get yourself into university. Yeah, the proper qualifications, and these are being developed. Hopefully, level 1 and 2 over the next 12. Obviously, the pandemic put everything back a little bit, but over the next 2 years, they will be fully developed and running. And anyone that wants to get on board, just hit us up, and we're really keen to work with as many MMA gyms, MMA coaches, whatever, anything. Just get on board.
That's open to everybody in England.
Yeah, in England. Yeah. The more we can get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet, and we all head down the same path.
Where should we get in touch with that? If anybody's
they've got EMA's got a Facebook page. I think there's an EMA website. I can't remember the website address. I've got a feeling it's .org.uk. I think, but I can maybe give you a link.
That
Yeah,
description,
I'll figure it out. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, drop a message and because it's going to be massive. It's a huge thing. The more, essentially, our aim is to get the sport recognised by Sport England as a sport, which then opens funding and for the grassroots level stuff, which we've already talked about how important the grassroots level stuff is, and bringing people in at that level. So if we can get that sport recognition, and then again it gives it. The IMAC project is looking to get it to the Olympics. Yeah. And this is all part of that process. Yeah, getting it recognised, getting everything official. People have been doing this sport for a long time now. It's about time it got some serious recognition, especially considering how big it is now, with the UFC and stuff.
Yeah. Why do you think Sambo is not one of those ones that's taken off in a similar way? Because they've tried to push for that for the Olympics before, haven't they? Combat Sambo.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's heavily Russian based, though, isn't it? Doesn't seem to have taken off in as many other countries as it is, as big as it is in Russia.
I think I only know of one place that trained it in the north.
I can only think of one place off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Well, I can only think of. Well, I can think of two coaches that used to do it. There's one. Is he called Georgia? Is he called? I think up in Macclesfield way. And there's, I'm sure Neil Hall used to do a bit of Sambo stuff as well, Yorkshire-based way. But it's not. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to have taken off in.
With we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but the danger for sports going down that pathway for like Olympic sport, like karate and taekwondo, is that they kind of have the danger of becoming watered down a little bit from what the original conception of it was. MMA, obviously, as you said, was like the rebels of traditional martial arts.
Yeah.
What would you like to see stay in place that kind of keeps that aspect of it and doesn't end up watering it down?
The big thing, I mean, one is rule set. You don't want to water the rule set down too much just to get it into the Olympics, because that's what makes it the sport that it is. The whole original, for me anyway, and obviously I realise I've probably got an old school mentality, is it was the true test of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
That was the point of the rule set being so limited. Is this? How do we know if it works or not? Well, we're going to stick it in a cage and you're going to scrap it out, and if you win, that clearly works. Yeah, that was the basic idea. Yeah, so for me, the more you water down the rule set, the more it moves away from being the sport it originally was.
It's like happened to judo, hasn't it?
Judo, wrestling to a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you watch some of the wrestling at Olympics, and it can be boring now because they mess around with the rule set so much that it loses its essence. Yeah, and so that don't play around with the rules too much. Yeah.
Sort of, you can see it happening a little bit in boxing as well, isn't it? It's sort of almost trying to stop the inevitable sort of damage. Almost.
Yeah, I get. There's a risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk factor to combat sports. I understand that, and mitigating the risk is important. But also, it takes the more this sort of safetyism can be a problem.
Yeah.
It's like we're all grown adults. If we choose to take part in it, we choose to take part in it. And mitigate the risks to the right degree is important. But if you water it down to where it's just tick and head guard, it becomes
tick.
It's not the same, is it? It's
like point sparring for karate, isn't it? Yeah. It would basically turn.
What's the point? And no one's going to turn on. No one's going to watch it. Yeah.
It's like fencing. It's almost fencing, isn't it?
And
there's nothing wrong with that. No, it's just a completely different thing.
Yeah, combat sports appeal to our primal nature. There's a reason people enjoy watching them. Yeah. Not everyone does. I get that. Yeah, but those that do enjoy it because it appeals to that nature of of a test of who is going to come out on top.
100%.
Yeah.
And in terms of people like wanting to go down that path, from whether they're a kid or an adult coming in, what would be your advice for somebody coming in day one to, let's say they've got the aspiration to wanting to fight? What are the key points that you'd say they need to take along that way? More as an adult, let's say. Like, do you have any criteria of like, you got to compete in a grappling competition.
Oh, right. So
first,
right.
like,
So
what's the
yeah.
path-
Okay.
what's the
So
pathway towards getting to that?
you know, I mean, I'm quite strict on, probably stricter than a lot of coaches on when I will let someone compete. You know, it's, you know, I have a sort of set standard in my head. Probably maybe a little bit too high, some might say, but that's just because for me, the safety side of it comes from the coach understanding when someone's ready to compete, not necessarily whacking loads more rules on. If the person's got the skill level to compete, they'll keep themselves safe because they've got the skill level to keep themselves safe. Yeah. So, you know, I have quite a high standard on when I expect someone to, you know, to step in there. And
kind of almost like the subtlety between knowing the difference between what's a blue belt and a purple belt. You can just see it in the person. And I guess that's like what we were saying before, having people that you've trained for years and you know them, and you can assess that over years rather than somebody just coming in and being like, I want to fight tomorrow.
Yeah, and you don't know anything about them their mental capabilities, you know, their physical capabilities. So you learn that over a period of time as watching them as a coach and understanding how they handle stress. Yep. Yeah, they handle, you know, being put under pressure. And that's part of something that you're going to coach within them, you know, and you know, they might have this part, but you have to build up this part. Yeah, so there's no set timeline you can give someone for when they can fight. You know, everyone wants to come in and ask you, when can I fight? Yeah. My answer is always, well, how long's a piece of string? Yeah. I always say it to them. You know, everyone's different. You know,
it takes them 12 months to learn how to jab. Then it's going to take them longer.
Exactly. You know, and then I'll say the other thing is commitment. You know, how much do you want to commit to it? Well, I can make twice a week. Well, it's probably going to take you 3 years to fight that. Yeah. Oh, it's been 3 years. Well, I'll put it this way. Do you want to fight someone in a year's time that's been training 6 days a week and you've been training twice a week? Yeah. No, I don't.
And the problem is, it's
like I can't ask the coach that question.
Yeah. It's a frame of reference for them coming in, because actually somebody coming in asking that question has no clue whatsoever what it's like to be in a fight. So they just think, oh, I'm going to have a scrap with somebody, but they don't know what the high level of somebody who is competing regularly or as an amateur or a professional is. And it was kind of a bit of a leading question, to be honest, because you get so many people coming into the gym and being like, oh, how long is it going to be till I reach X goal, whether that's like lose weight or get my blue belt? And the answer is always, it depends. And it mostly depends on your level of commitment, doesn't it?
Yeah, commitment. Without a doubt, it depends on your level of commitment. Yeah. You know, if you train 5 days a week, you're going to see results quicker. And if you train, but then it gets even more in depth. It's like, okay, I'm training 5 days a week. Are you committed to those hours that you are in the gym, or are you staring out the window watching the bird fly by as the coach is telling you what's going on? Yeah, you know, and again, that makes a difference. Yeah, you know, I think about what you have to take, or you're actually engaged in the training that you're engaged in. Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing about it, though, isn't it? Like this sport and combat sports, the thing that I've always found over the years is it's so engaging. You want to be in it. And fully participating, and it's a great hobby to have if you just, even as a hobbyist, being able to come in and enjoy that hour, 2 hours with your mates and switch off and focus on that whilst developing your skill set.
Yeah, without a doubt. You don't have to think about the outside world so much. You can get him, you know.
It's kind of bad too if you're stopping someone choking.
You don't think about what you did at work that day, are you?
No.
Yeah. But yeah, and most martial arts clubs will have a community around them, and it's a bunch of mates all training together, which is always something that appeals, you know, to be part of, you know, and pulls you in more. I think that's what pulls you in more as well. Yeah, is the fact that all adds up to wanting to take part in it, really.
And there's a lot more women now as well, isn't there? Training and
it's
competing.
It's much more diverse now than it ever was. When I first started training, mainly probably because it just wasn't that well known back then. Yeah, you know, every gym was a tiny little room, little sweat box with, you know, 4 or 5 guys all beating each other up, and that was it. So it just wasn't that. And because it's got a lot more publicity behind it now, and it's much more diverse now, and a good gym, you know, isn't prejudice, and you know, you'll see a mix of people training there nowadays.
You sort of see that sort of down to maybe like the role models within the sport as well. Like they're a bit more vocal, and people will tend to gravitate. It's like you've got a lot more sort of like when the Ronda Rouseys came through, there's a bit more of an influx of like female women want to train, and now that's happened. There's more sort of female athletes for them to look up to.
Oh, of course there is, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that you know, them role models are a huge part of bringing more people and diversity, you know, into the sport and at the grassroots level.
Yeah,
it's going to drive. You know, I'm trying to think when we first started getting female athletes come through the door to training. It probably was around about the Ronda Rousey era. Because obviously, again, it was more publicised. Yeah. So people say, "Oh, what's that about?" And then more people come knocking on the doors to train. And now you see, I mean, jiu-jitsu again. It's you're seeing females get more high-level fights. Yeah. Higher up on the cards, on the pay-per-views and stuff. So I mean, it's good to see, and it's something that you see a lot more of nowadays.
I suppose it's kind of a bit of a elephant in the room for all jiu-jitsu MMA clubs, is like the influence of the UFC on people coming in having seen it and being like, I want to train UFC. No, it's actually you're going to train MMA, and the positive and negative aspects of the influence of the UFC.
It's been huge positives. I mean, UFC is the driving factor behind most modern martial arts, whether that be jiu-jitsu or MMA. Yeah. That you know, the UFC is where the popularity of these sports has come from. Yeah. And you know, as martial artists and as guys that teach these sports, we've got to take that on board and give them the credit that that's what's essentially driven these sports to such popular levels. But yeah, it does have its negative factors as well, because it's glamorous and people come in thinking it's a glamorous thing to do, and then when you get punched in the nose, realise actually it hurts quite a bit. Yeah, it's not quite as you know, all flashing lights and being your Conor McGregor on.
You're not going to get paid for getting punched in the face. You're not going to have a Reebok sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. Most of your time spent in a sweatbox gym training hard. Yeah, you know, it's not the glamorous lifestyle is what they're hoping it's going to be at first.
But you've got to have those things there to attract people to get into it, haven't you? So, for as much stick as it does take and stuff that it probably does wrong, I think the positives probably outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, they've been a driving force behind everything. I mean, the rule set, MMA rule set, is driven by the UFC. You know, the safety aspects have been driven by the UFC. You know, I mean, a lot of people working to make that happen, but they've been a driving factor behind a lot of things. You know, they've kind of made it the sport that it is. So they've done it does have its negatives, but every sport does. They've got a lot of positives that they've done. You know, and even for like of jiu-jitsu, you know, Gracie's coming through the UFC, and obviously, you know, designed for them to showcase their martial art. But even still to this day, you know, a lot of people first learn about jiu-jitsu through watching the UFC.
We talked a bit before about like the pros and cons, or the negatives or the positives of social media, and I suppose one thing that's just springing to my mind now is like when you look at the way that I think certain athletes feel like they need to promote themselves for fights. Do you see that spilling down into the amateur stuff and kind of detracting from what it's actually supposed to be? Yeah,
I'm not the biggest fan of that for that amateur side of things. You know, for me, amateur is about learning your craft, not about. It's definitely not about learning to necessarily be a spokesman on social media. I understand. I mean, it's difficult because what I say to people, and I say this when they get into the sport, I say, look, you want to be a pro. So the first thing you need to understand is you're an entertainer. Yeah. You know, and as athletes, we think it's about being an athlete, and I get that, but it's not. It's about whether someone's willing to pay money to watch you compete. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because if they're not, the sport doesn't exist. Yeah, whatever sport you look at, motor racing, football, rugby, it exists because fans will pay money to sit on a seat and watch you do what you're doing. Yeah. So you're an entertainer. Yeah. So I understand that when you get to pro level, and I'll always say, you know, you either need to be a good guy or a bad guy. You can't be this in between. You can't be this person that no one pays attention to.
No.
Yeah. So, I always use George St. Pierre played the good guy very well. The honest martial art battle. He played it very well. And then you've got your bad guys. Conor McGregor plays a bit of a bad guy. And
I think John Jones is going down that
John
route
June, to a little bit.
Yeah.
Sonnen played the bad guy very well. Made a great career of
He
it.
wrote the book on it, didn't he?
Yeah, he wrote the book. He wrote the book on it, but he understood that concept. He understood that concept really well, and made a career of it.
Yeah,
I've got all respect for him for doing that. It's like he understood how to put himself in the limelight.
You get the anomalies, don't you? It's like Forrest Griffin. He just came in as the Joker.
Yeah, played it. And people liked him as a good guy and this Joker and a laugh, and and he played it really well. And it's understanding playing the character well for what people, are paying you to be sometimes.
Yeah.
And I get that, and as an athlete, you want it to be about the best. But sometimes it's not.
No. I think some people get it wrong as well, don't they? And want the personality aspect of it to be the shining thing over the skill set. Actually, like what you were just saying there, playing the good guy and the bad guy, it's so glaringly obvious when somebody's trying to put on a fake persona that's not them, that it's off-putting to everybody watching. And
sometimes people develop a persona too soon and get the mouth signs of a fight necessarily they shouldn't be in yet. Which again, that's probably about good management and a good coach behind them to advise them, And there is an aspect, there's a degree to it that's, and probably a degree that's underlooked is. And you see it probably in higher level sports is media training. You don't really see it in probably because it isn't a recognised sport over here yet. But if you go to the Olympics, for instance, for a lot of sports you'll get media training and how to deal with the media, how to deal with talking to people and the way you represent yourself. And it's probably something that's heavily overlooked as an athlete over here.
The States do well, don't they? Because you've got televised sport even from high school through college, and then
they probably do have, to be fair, media training officers on there. You look at their high school football stuff; it's ridiculous. What the level that it's done at. They've got strength and conditioning coach, they've got a nutrition coach, they've got if they're the quarterback, they've got a quarterback coach, they've got the head coach, they've got they've probably got a media trainer. They've got someone helping them with the schoolwork. It's like it's a tight-knit unit that's all working together as a process.
So much money behind it as well, isn't there? You can't. It's going to be really difficult to get that over here because of the level of funding.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about earlier on. It's about got to get recognised as a sport. You've got to get these qualifications in place. This is all the starting point to funding being brought in. There's a book called, I think it's called The Talent Lab, I want to say, and it talks about how how sort of like Great Britain brought itself to become quite a powerhouse in the Olympics, and it's through funding and having the right people in the right places, and it all starts for MMA if we want to get to that level. And even jiu-jitsu is looking at trying to get themselves as a recognised sport. It starts with getting yourself as a recognised sport. That's step one. Step one, get that in place. Step two, get the right qualifications in place. So you've got recognised coaches doing the recognised jobs, and then funding builds from there.
I think one of the people that are probably doing it the best, and still it's probably at nowhere near the level of what it is in the States, is like the FA. They're a perfect example, and look at the everything they're doing is great, but it's still in that developmental process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I mean, the sports are already doing it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
No.
We just need to say, what are you doing? All right, cool. And we'll just tweak it for MMA.
Give us your model. Give us your model.
Well, the model already exists. And to be honest, most of them are happy to share it. Because they understand it's a growth mindset. They want sport to, be a big part in everything. So they understand it, and most of the time they're happy to share it. It's just a case of us getting ourselves in a place where we all pull in the same direction. Usually, that's the hard bit. Usually,
Well, it's happened with boxing, hasn't it? Where they've got the different governing bodies that are trying to sort of pull everyone in the different directions.
And they get pulled in different directions, and then it spoils it. You need to all pull in the same. If you rowing a ship, we'll all row in the same direction, aren't we? It's got to be there, and you can't let politics and sometimes opinion, and just because necessarily I might not get on with someone if it's going to get us in the right direction, we're going to have to put our differences aside and go in the same direction.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes martial arts can be, especially, you know, traditional backgrounds can sometimes pull in the wrong directions against that, and you've got to get everyone round the table and pull in the right direction.
Like, well, that's a good point as well, actually. So you're heavily involved with that now going forward. You've had your career as a competitor, you've been doing the coaching for 10 years. Like, what's your immediate and long-term goals for developing the club and the involvement in developing youth programs and legitimising the sport?
For me, I mean, the goals at the moment are get these qualifications up and running, get them out there, get opportunities. Because what I want to see is opportunities for the likes of, obviously we've got some youth coming through now. I want them to be able to get some legitimate qualifications, and then I want them to have some job opportunities within a career that they can enjoy doing. You know, now obviously I've been lucky and set up my own business, but it's like, you know, we talked about before, it takes a leap of faith to a degree, because there isn't anything out there. We've got to develop it ourselves and hope for the best sometimes and learn the hard way, whereas I want them to have, for it not to be quite as difficult as that, have job opportunities. You know, you can go down the athlete path, you can open up a club or a facility because you've got the right coaching qualifications underneath you. It being a recognised sport all of a sudden opens up jobs within EMA, because you have coaching jobs and and all this other stuff, and sports nutritionists, and they can go to university with it. That's my long-term goal, really, is to create them opportunities for people, and for the youth coming through. I think that's probably the most important factor. You know, it's cool taking fighters to big shows and all that, but in reality, if you want to have a true impact on the sport, that's where the impact will be.
It's a bigger legacy for
it's
the whole
a much
industry, isn't it?
bigger legacy for the sport if we can get it recognised and legitimised and creating opportunities for everybody, than just having a fighter that fought in the UFC. It's cool, don't get me wrong, it's cool, but I think it's important.
And there's a lot of people doing all the individual aspects of it, like we talked through the whole podcast. You've got youth sports nutritionists, strength and conditioning, coaches, athletes. You're trying to get it all unified into one area, and again, that's going to the website that we'll put in the link on the description, and pushing that all forward, really.
But yeah, without a doubt, push all that forward, and it's the same for jiu-jitsu as well. You know, with I think the UK BJJ. I mean, I'm not heavily involved with them guys, but I imagine they've got a similar beliefs. And what they're trying to push the sport forward. And as soon as you get that, everything, more opportunities open up for everybody involved. It can only be a good thing. You know, and that's something that I think is the important thing now. You know, as I get a bit older, I think that's something that I want to push and see pushed. And hopefully, the sport will get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's no reason it can't be.
No. It's popular enough.
And it's popular. Popular. It seems to be growing. Always growing.
The young talent coming through as well. I had the pleasure of watching a few of you guys at the
Interclub.
Yeah. Scary talent.
You know, it's crazy. I mean, these young kids that are coming through now, they're so skillful, and it's just like, I didn't know any of this when I was their age. You know, it's nuts. And if they've got opportunities to make a career path out of it and be an athlete as well, that's amazing. You know, because at the minute it's difficult to be an athlete. You know, because you've got to take a chance on it. Whereas if you've got career paths to go down, it's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? You know, when you've got these elite pathways that they can follow, that like boxing has, and these other sports, it's a whole different kettle of fish for them. Got way more opportunities.
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good place to wrap that up there, isn't it?
Definitely,
Any more? Anything else you want to ask? We probably talked for, I don't know how long we've been talking for here. We should have set a timer, but it's been a
while. It's been a while.
Plus before that as well. No, cheers for sitting down. I really appreciate
So
that.
before we sort of round it out, where can everybody sort of find information about 12 Gauge? And
We've got a website, 12gagemma.com. Head on over to there. Obviously, Facebook page as well, 12 Gauge MMA. We've got a YouTube channel. I think that's on 12 Gauge MMA. Pretty much anything you search 12 Gauge MMA is usually they'll find us. Yeah, but just head on over there. And if you ever hit me up with any questions or anything, we're happy to help out any way I can.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool. No problem. Cheers, guys. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.